Welcome to Shelf Help, a channel dedicated to talking into the void about whatever book I happen to be reading. I am your host, the reader. The following review will contain spoilers. If you haven't read the first book, Crown of Feathers, and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your chance to back out. There's no way to talk about this book without revealing the twist of the last. Still here? Awesome. In the last book, we learned that Val is actually a Valkyra, not Veronica's sister, but her aunt, and the last feathered-crowned queen. In the last battle of the Blood War, a Valkyra shot her sister, Veronia, mistaking her for an enemy. Realizing her mistake, she flew to her sister, only to have her phoenix shot down. The princesses died together, Veronia of her wounds, and a Valkyra in her phoenix's fire. Veronica was delivered by a Valkyra's spymaster, who was hiding in the castle as a nurse. She spirited the child princess away, and raised her as her granddaughter in the back alleys of Auranova. A Valkyra ends up in an orphanage. As she grows, her memories of who she was come back to her in bits and pieces, and she eventually finds her way to her spymaster and her niece, and sets about to regain her throne. This series puts me in mind of an Irma Bombeck quote. Family, the ties that bind, and gag. The Blood War was called the Blood War because it was between sisters, both vying for the crown. A Valkyra is older, she's an animagi, and she has a phoenix. Veronia is younger, and has neither magic nor a phoenix. It might have all worked out with them ruling together, but Veronia's mother, a Valkyra's stepmother, moved to have her own daughter placed on the throne. A Valkyra had her killed. Shockingly, this caused a rift in the sisters' relationship. A Valkyra is a sociopath, at least in this life. Probably in the last one as well, though that's less clear. She does love her sister and her niece, though not in the way most people would use the word. She does not wish them active harm or want them to die, but she is perfectly happy to use them to advance her own ends, even if it makes them miserable. Growing up, when she told Veronica about her past life, though Val never admitted she was a Valkyra, she always framed herself as the smart, brave, and oppressed. In her view, the provincial governors had corrupted her weak-minded, naive sister into a puppet queen to steal her rightful throne. A Valkyra can only think of herself in two contradicting lights. She is the most powerful person in the world, or she is the victim of a vile plot. She is always right, and when things go wrong, it is never her fault. She is controlling to a ridiculous degree. In her last life, she used shadow magic to enforce her control over the other writers. In this one, she uses it to enforce her control over Veronica. For the writers, she applies a bind, making them loyal to her and her alone. For Veronica, it's not so direct. She spent Veronica's entire life browbeating her with and about shadow magic. She constantly invades Veronica's mind, and then berates her for not blocking properly. This has led Veronica to constantly being on her guard, building mental walls to keep her sister out, and everyone else. But a Valkyra has 2 lifetimes worth of experience in using her shadow magic. However, magic is not a bottomless well, and everyone has a different amount. A Valkyra uses her magic to enforce the loyalty of her followers, and Veronica builds mental barriers, both cut into their stores. So neither girl is operating at full capacity. A Valkyra's big mistake is believing her own hype. She has been framing Veronia, and by extension Veronica, as weak for so long that she assumes giving Veronica a little freedom would show her just how helpless she is and how much she needs protection. Even when Veronica shows herself a capable fighter and flyer, a Valkyra dismisses her as the lesser sister. As for Veronica, she's still working through her trauma. A Valkyra, for all the horrible things she has done, is still her sister Val. She's still the one who made sure Veronica was fed and sheltered and protected after their grandmother/spymaster was taken by the mob. She's the one who gave Veronica her phoenix. And despite the fact Val then killed said phoenix, the act that drove Veronica away, she is also the one who brought it back and reunited them. A large part of Veronica's healing is vivisecting the truth from Val's lies. Or at least the truth outside of Val's perception. One of the most interesting scenes is when Val forces a memory into Veronica's head. Something she's done Veronica's whole life, but this one is different. Most of the memories up until this point have been of Valkyra and Veronia as children, when they still got along. Or of Valkyra on her own. This one is in the middle of the Blood War. Veronia has left the castle with only a handful of guards to speak with her sister outside of official channels. That is to say, the princess, the most valuable member of the Empire, walked into an enemy base surrounded by Phoenix Riders with magic, and her only defense is 4 rather nervous guards. But Veronia was not brave, of course, says Val. These visions aren't just played out like watching a movie. They're from Valkyra's memories and infused with her feelings. For the first time, Veronica is able to separate herself from those feelings. Instead of seeing the world as Val dictates, she's seeing Val for the first time. She feels her anger, her arrogance, her feeling of superiority over her sister, even going so far as to compare her sister to a third goddess who was devoured by her more powerful sister. But in the end, she still allows her sister to leave safely, despite her value as a bargaining chip in the war. There is a point where a Valkyra says that Veronica can't feel the weight of the crown. A Valkyra who took an empire into civil war, who is willing to restart said war to gain the throne, who uses magic and blackmail to force her former patrol to do her bidding, who uses death and enslavement of thousands of animagi just to force her sister niece's hand. If you don't realize a Valkyra's full of shit by now, I'm not sure what else I can say to convince you. Veronica comes into possession of a box that, among other things, has her birth certificate, complete with official notarization. Her first reaction is to hide it, though knowing who Val really is, she had some suspicions. Up until that moment, she could apply plausible deniability. She does tell Tristan, because she trusts him, but keeps it hidden from everyone else, including the Rider Commander. And it's not that she does not want the responsibility. She is perfectly happy to be Tristan's second, and spearheads the search for riders in hiding. What she does not want is to be placed above the people she's just beginning to call friends, and who are just beginning to forgive her for pretending to be a boy in the last book. A Valkyra can only see the rights the crown will endow. Veronica sees the responsibility and the distance it creates. Then there's Sev and Cade. I didn't talk about them much in the last review because they were a side story revolving around the army moving to attack the Riders. Sev is a weak animagi who was drafted as a soldier after hiding what he was. Cade is a bondservant, an animagi forced into bondage just for being an animagi. It's still unclear how people without magic force people with magic to do their bidding. It sounds like a good way to get stomped by your horse or mobbed by birds to me. After helping deliver the phoenix eggs Cade helped smuggle, Sev has returned to the army, this time as a spy for the Riders. This puts him in the position to save Cade's life, and together they work both the army and the bondservants for information, eventually stumbling upon a Valkyra's plan to draw the Riders into a new war. Spying isn't really sitting well with Sev. He's been lying his whole life, but it was always for his own sake. Being reunited with Cade gives him a rock to lean on, and someone who has been working for a Valkyra's former spy master. The big draw of their story is the will they, won't they. Unlike Veronica and Tristan, who are falling hard and fast, Siv and Cade are delicately trying to decide if the other feels the same way. And it's adorable. Especially when Siv gets drunk. Based on where their story leaves off, I think they're going to play a bigger role in the next book, and I'm really looking forward to it. The book's biggest weakness is it still has a tendency to explain everything to the nth degree. For example, "You two are more obvious than Princess Pearl and her riverboat captain," she said, shaking her head before strolling away. Princess Pearl was the title character of a famous Ardorian comedy of the same name, and the riverboat captain was her love, as well as a prince in disguise. Veronica smiled uncomfortably at the realization that the comparison was even more apt than Alexia knew, that in her life, Veronica would be the riverboat captain and Tristan the princess. Thank you for explaining the joke. That always helps. And it's just not that one example. I could turn to any page and find another. I mean, there are some very famous books that are unsubtle. The Chronicle of Narnia might as well beat you about the head while screaming through a megaphone that the lion is Christ. But it's also a children's book. It's speaking to fairly young readers about a rather abstract concept. By the time you reach a YA level, it's okay not to spell everything out. There is a point where it becomes condescending. It's okay to let readers, even younger ones, do some interpretation of the story. I'm going to put this on my third shelf. It's better than the first book, but the need to explain everything really hurts it. Veronica and Valkra's relationship is interesting and complex. Veronica loves Valkra, and she still thinks of her as her sister Val, while recognizing that their relationship is unhealthy on several levels. And for a YA audience, this speaks volumes. Veronica is just beginning to step out of her sister aunt's shadow and discover who she is as a person, to spread her wings, if you will. A very relatable theme for readers in their early teens. Thank you for your time. I know everyone's mileage will vary, so feel free to leave your thoughts.